The crash of cannon fire shattered the calm, a brutal symphony of destruction echoing across the waves, the air filled with the acrid smell of gunpowder, a constant reminder of the deadly game being played. Smoke and screams filled the air, a chaotic blend of terror and desperation. The cries of the wounded mingled with the shouts of orders, creating a cacophony of noise that was both deafening and disorienting. On the pirate sloop the captain stood, no hero, no knight in shining armor, but a pragmatic leader driven by necessity. He was a hardened mariner, his face etched with the stories of countless battles, his eyes cold and focused on the task at hand. He knew that hesitation could mean death. The merchant ship was bigger, a lumbering giant compared to the sleek pirate vessel. But its crew was terrified, a motley collection of sailors and merchants, unprepared for the pirates' ferocity and hunger for blood. They were ill-equipped to defend themselves against such a ruthless assault. The pirates, seasoned and ruthless veterans of countless skirmishes, unleashed another devastating broadside, their cannons roaring in defiance, splinters flying like deadly rain, men falling to the deck, their screams lost in the din of battle. The air grew thick with the smell of blood and burning wood. Grappling hooks soared through the air, propelled by strong arms, biting into the enemy's rail with a satisfying thud. The time for cannons ended, the distance had closed, and the battle was about to become a brutal, close-quarters affair. Now came cold steel, the glint of cutlasses and the promise of bloodshed. Pirates surged forward, a wave of desperate and violent men, ready to claim their prize and spill blood to get it. This was piracy, brutal, swift, terrifyingly real, a desperate dance with death on the high seas. Every battle was a gamble, life or death hanging in the balance, plunder or oblivion the only possible outcomes. There was no middle ground in this brutal world. The captain signaled, his voice hoarse from shouting commands, and the pirates stormed the merchant deck, a chaotic mass of steel and fury. Pistols barked, their reports echoing across the water, cutlasses clashed in a deadly ballet of steel, and the merchant crew, overwhelmed and outmatched, surrendered, begging for mercy that might not come. For the pirates this was more than victory, it was survival, a temporary reprieve from the harsh realities of their lives. A payday earned through blood, a chance to taste the fleeting sweetness of wealth before the next battle. They endured storms that threatened to swallow them whole, sickness that ravaged their bodies, and the ever-present threat of the noose. All for moments like this, moments of triumph and fleeting prosperity. There was no romance here, no swashbuckling adventure as the stories often told. Only the harsh reality of desperate men fighting for their lives, clinging to survival in a brutal world. For a place in a world that had cast them aside, a world that offered them no other choice. Each raid was a desperate bid for freedom, a chance to rewrite their destinies, however briefly. The black flag was not a symbol of adventure or glory, it was a declaration of war against the world, but of rebellion, a defiant act against the established order, a refusal to be broken. For these men, piracy was the only path left, the only way to carve out a life for themselves in a world that had rejected them. Their world was violence, a constant struggle for survival in a sea of blood and treachery. And their freedom was always at risk, a fragile thing that could be snatched away at any moment by a storm, a rival, or the long arm of the law. But who were these pirates, really? What drove them to a life outside the law, sailing under the black flag? They weren't the storybook villains we often imagine, but rather outcasts and individuals drawn from every corner of society, each with their own story of hardship and resilience. Many were former sailors, experienced in the ways of the sea, driven to piracy by the brutal discipline and often inhumane treatment they faced. The promise of freedom was a powerful lure, especially compared to the miserable conditions in the Navy or merchant marine. Pirate crews were remarkably diverse: English, Irish, French, Dutch, Portuguese, and a significant number of men of African descent, often escaped slaves seeking a new life. On a pirate ship, far from the constraints of land, skill, loyalty, and courage mattered far more than background, nationality, or skin color. Even a few women, like the infamous Bonny and Mary Red, disguised themselves as men and fought as equals alongside their male counterparts. Ultimately, pirates were united by a shared refusal to accept the rigid social hierarchies and oppressive power structures of the world ashore. They were rebels, fugitives from injustice, and dreamers, seeking a better life beyond the reach of kings and empires. They were forging their own society at sea, bound by a shared code and a common purpose. For many, Piracy was not simply about evil or greed, it was about survival, defiance, and the pursuit of a life on their own terms. The black flag, a symbol of rebellion, welcomed anyone who refused to be broken by the harsh realities of the 18th century. On the open sea, beyond the reach of established authority, they found a rough equality and a sense of belonging that was so often denied to them elsewhere in the world. Life on a pirate ship was grueling. Endless labor, rotten food, and constant danger. Hardtack and salted meat were barely edible, water quickly turned foul, and disease was rampant. Storms could strike without warning, and a single misstep meant death. Scurvy, dysentery, and fever claimed many lives. Yet pirates enforced their own code, rules agreed upon by all, not imposed by a tyrant. Discipline was harsh but collective, a stark contrast to Navy ships. Their floating society was built on shared hardship and mutual survival. Pirate ships, often romanticized in stories, were actually radical democracies for their time, standing in stark contrast to the rigid hierarchies of naval vessels and the societies they sailed from. Captains were elected by the crew, a truly revolutionary concept. They could also be removed by the crew if they proved incompetent or tyrannical. Their authority was absolute, but it lasted only in battle, when decisive leadership was paramount. The real day-to-day power lay with the quartermaster, also elected by the crew, who divided plunder fairly amongst the shipmates. The quartermaster also maintained order and settled disputes. Loot was shared fairly. The captain and quartermaster got a slightly larger share as recognition of their responsibilities, but every man, regardless of his position before joining the crew, received a full and equal share. A common fund, built from a small percentage of each haul, compensated injuries sustained in battle, a rare and progressive form of insurance for the time. This system offered not only economic freedom but also a chance at social mobility and a direct voice in the governance of their ship and their lives. Pirates could earn more in one successful raid than they might earn in a lifetime of service in the Navy or toiling ashore. The promise of wealth, equality, and a say in their own destiny drew men from all walks of life to embrace piracy. The pirate ship, therefore, was more than just a vessel of plunder. It was a floating republic, a place where the common man, for a brief and dangerous time, truly ruled his own fate. The pirate's life was short and brutal. The sea was unforgiving. Storms, reefs, and disease claimed many. If not the sea, then the law navies hunted pirates relentlessly. Capture meant a quick trial and a public hanging, bodies left as warnings. The golden age of piracy burned bright but brief, crushed by empires. Pirates could win battles but never the war. Their rebellion was doomed, but for a moment they tasted freedom. The black flag remains a symbol, not of treasure but of defiance against a world that gave them no place.